Hi everybody, it's Stephen Brooke and welcome to my YouTube channel on architectural photography and composition. There are two things that I think really help you as a photographer, as an artist. One is to do drawing from life. There's nothing that tells you the truth more than doing live figure drawing. And the other is to do still life. This is something you can do anytime. You can set up a little space in your own office or studio where you have a still life going all the time. And so what I want to do is I want to give you a brief history of still life, show you the varieties of approaches to still life, and give you some suggestions as to how you can incorporate this into your own work and come out of it a better photographer than you were before. So let's have a look first at the history of what still life is and the history of still life. Still life is concentrated vision. It's the art of very serious attention. And in essence, there are some elements to what make a still life different from other aspects of art subject matter. One is contemplation, again, to be thinking about something. Contrasts and harmonies, inherent in the proximity, the closeness of silent objects, and this is what's important, touched by the same light. It's the light that is the governing principle. You have objects lit by the same light. What that light does to them, how close they are, how far apart they are, what kind of background you have, all of those go in to making a great still life. And let me just say for a second, when you're out photographing architecture or landscape or interiors, the subject matter is pretty much there for you. This is a building that you have to photograph. That's the subject matter. And you decide what time of day, what angles, all that. But the actual subject matter itself, that's kind of chosen for you. Same thing with interiors, or if you have a landscape architect as a client, shoot this garden. Well, the garden is there, the materials are there, the hardscape is there. You don't have to invent that stuff. Still life, if you take this on as your own kind of exercise, you have to invent everything. It's all up to you. What kind of background you select, what kind of lighting you select, what kind of objects you select. We'll go into this in a little bit more detail. But that's why I like still life, because it puts the burden on you as an artist to make all the decisions. To do this right, it demands concentrated vision. You have to really think about what you're doing. And it is almost like music, its own mode of expression. And the compositions, if they are going to have artistic merit, they have to have a sense of inevitability. And again, like I discussed in my YouTube video on everything is compositional. In still life, everything is really compositional. There can't be anything that doesn't count, because each individual element relates to every other element. And if there's something in there that doesn't belong, it's going to take away from the whole. So again, in still life, everything really is compositional. There are a lot of things you can discuss, you can think about, you can portray in still life. Color, form, texture, line, clarity versus subtlety, stability versus activity, culture, transparency versus opacity. As we'll see, mortality versus immortality was something that was a subject for still life. And control versus randomness. In order for a still life to have strength, artistic strength, it really needs to be personal. It's got to be something of you that you are putting into this photograph. You know it's still, I mean, there's still lifes everywhere. A Christmas creche is a still life. A Passover Seder centerpiece, that's a still life. The tea ceremony is a wonderful still life. And a Thanksgiving centerpiece, that's still life almost in every home in the country. If you were a painter and wanted to make your living just painting architecture and interiors, you would have to almost wait till the 17th century to be able to earn a living. Not so with still life. Still life goes back, is an ancient art form. This is 1422 BC. Here's the tomb of Mena. This is a still life. Here's the house of Julia Felix in Pompeii, 79 AD. Here is somebody who, on this fresco, painted a still life. In the Renaissance, still life painters in the Renaissance, the idea was they brought drama to very ordinary objects. They made them the star of their painting. Here's Caravaggio's Basket of Fruit, 1596. What's interesting here is when you look at the fruit, when you look at Caravaggio's subject matter, it says something about his view of the world. Now, Caravaggio was allegedly a real rake. He was charged with murder. He had a pretty wild life. That said, he was a painter of majestic brilliance. And if you look carefully at his still life, there's this rotten hole in the apple. The leaves are dying, they're falling apart. This peach has seen better moments. This pear definitely has seen better moments. And in this still life, in this basket of fruit, he is saying something about the decay that he sees around him. Whether it's individual decay or cultural decay, he's still making a statement about that in his still life. On the other hand, Caravaggio was very religious, and in his painting of Supper at Emmaus, on the table here is this wonderful still life that is filled with Christian symbols. The Dutch were masters of still life, and it was an expression of their lives, their successes, their aspirations. Don't forget, before that, the churches were the patrons of the arts, and if you were an artist, you were paid to do frescoes, murals of the saints, lives of the popes, paintings for the churches. After the Reformation, you did paintings of the churches, and instead of necessarily religious symbolism, you painted the trappings of the culture around you. The burgermeisters, the rich patrons of the arts, wanted paintings of their homes, of their possessions, and so the Dutch were wonderful at still life painting. And the objects are a metaphor for the society or the world. When you look at, here's a board, that's a game for playing games, wine glass, musical instrument. You didn't have the time to do this unless you had some leisure time. And if you were very poor and working 14, 16 hours a day, you did not have much leisure time. These are the trappings of people with money, and they were the patrons of these artists. Here's Peter Claes, a vanitas with violin and glass ball. This is the other side of that kind of still life painting. Here he is back here. You can see him in the reflection. And when you look at his still life, the strings are broken on the violin, the glass is tipped over, the watch may or may not be working. And over here is this skull. And there is no better metaphor for mortality in the face of all of these trappings of wealth than a skull. It lets you know you are not here forever, rich as you may be. The modern still life era, like Cézanne, the objects are meant to be contemplated rather than used. And it's interesting that when you look at Cézanne and look at his paintings architecturally, he is on axis, the high, very proportioned, perfect subdivision of the picture plane. When you count the number of objects, There's a rhythm to it. Items are in front of or behind one another. There's a great flow to everything going on. If you soft focus your eyes, these can almost be pieces of architecture. But there's one point of view, one vanishing point. It's a moment in time, and this all changes when you get to the cubists. Because what the cubists are doing, instead of looking at a set of objects from one point of view, they are looking at it from this point of view, and they're moving and looking at it from that point of view, and looking at it from this point of view. In other words, they are almost implying the passage of time in their paintings. So here's Picasso's Cubist still life. You're looking down on the plate, you're looking aside, you're looking, and Picasso has this death's head in here. Again, this is St. Andre of Vanitas painting from 1650. The same thing. You have the trappings of wealth, possessions, and here's the skull to remind you you're not going to be here forever. Salvador Dali, he was extravagant. It's fun to kind of put him down. Salvador Dali could paint. I mean, he had tremendous chops. And he was interested in a lot of things and took an interest in science. And one of the aspects of science that caught his attention was the notion that atoms are always in motion. He had picked up some information about quantum physics where the electron is not some little marble circling the atom, but is in fact looked at as a probability of where it will be somewhere around the atom. And so he says, if everything is in motion, I'm going to make my still life and I'm going to put everything in motion to kind of give a sense of what I understand about the real world, what I have learned from physics. Dali was also very deeply religious, Catholic religious, and he paints the bread, which is a sacrament, with hyper clarity. He is sure of how the bread is symbolic of the body of Christ. He knows that. Everything else, not so sure. Everything else goes into complete ambiguity. It's all black back here. But the bread he is sure of. And so he is really saying something in his still life. Here's Van Gogh, activity, the flowers highly active, inertia, here's the table. His still life with vase and irises, 1890. René Magritte is wonderful because Magritte, as a surrealist, he takes the notion that in dreams, objects associate with one another that normally don't in real life. And so he takes these objects, which again may not relate to one another, but he's going to put them in his still life painting and put them down in such a way that makes you wonder what it is you are absolutely looking at. He changes scale. And here, he is doing in a way what the Dutch painters and engravers are doing, but he's taking a cynical attitude. He is looking these objects as a metaphor for the world, a comb, a soap, blowing these out of proportion to say something about the fact that he thinks that maybe we as a society put too much emphasis on these things. This was a still life I did for Ton Luc, who was a Dutch-born interior designer who loved Caravaggio and appreciated Caravaggio's kind of offbeat view of the world. And so what I did here was I found my half-dead fruit, laid this all out, used incandescent lighting, and set my color balance to daylight so that I would have an overly warm feel to this still life. And it also made these blues back here pop out against all of these warm tones. And again, I was trying to do with this still life what Caravaggio was doing here. You know, this watermelon is inedible now. The bananas are gone. The leaves are also gone. And this is what Ton wanted for the still life for him, for his house. Techniques for still life. F-stop is so important. If you have an object, and here's the wall, and your object is close to the wall, and here you are, and you're shooting at f16 or f22, everything will be in focus. The object will be in focus, and the wall will be in focus. But if you open up, let's say, to f4, and focus right on the edge of your object, the wall will go out of focus. So you have to decide, is that what you want to do? You can also take an object and pull it further away. The further you take it from the wall, the less depth of field you're going to have. You can focus on right on the edge of your object, and the wall will go completely out of focus. Lighting has to be brought under strict control, and this is something you can decide. Are you going to have natural daylight? Are you going to pound it with one light that's going to be super hot, deep shadows like film noir? Or are you going to have a softer light with a background and fill in the shadows a little more? Are you going to underexpose it and make it look like a Wes Craven movie? Or are you going to open it up, brighten it up, make it super, super high key? Those are all decisions that you can make. Color balance is really important. This is a still life that I did in Savannah. Here's my shot. This is a really warm tone, and I did one with this heavy cyan filtration just to show you what a difference it makes. As a human being, your eye likes the warmth. This is very kind of sour looking. And again, remember, everything is compositional. Everything has to be just right. So here's what I would like for you to consider to do while you're home, while you're sheltered at home. Something that I think is going to really help. Set up an area and decide what kind of background are you going to use. It's going to be simple. It's going to be a white wall. It's going to be a colored wall. Is it going to be a fabric? Is it going to be a painting that you can set up in front? Make that decision. Then decide what kind of lighting. Natural light, hard light, softer light, balanced. Frontal light is going to flatten things out. If you bring the light all the way from the side, you're going to light all the edges and show all the texture. That's another look. Select your in-camera color balance. If you have your lights set up, you can take your color balance way high. Take it to 8,000, 9,000. It's going to be really warm. Or you can take it all the way down to 2,800, and it's going to be very cool if you have daylight balanced lighting. Get 7 objects. You pick them, have somebody else pick them. They can be related. They don't have to be related. Remember Magritte and the Surrealists, they don't have to be related. Set things up and start with 2 objects. Don't start with 1. Start with 2 objects. Now you have a decision to make. Are they going to be close together? Are they going to be far apart? One in front, one behind. Every one of those situations says something different. So get them set up, see where the shadows are, get it as close to what you think is perfection as possible, and take those photos. And remember, a full bracket of photos. The underexposed ones might really surprise you. The overexposed ones might really surprise you. Then add the third element. You're going to keep the 2 the way they are and add the third element as an outlier, or are you going to make that third element part of that group? I don't know. It's going to be up to you. Once you have the 3 of those and you get that set, bring in the 4th, bring in the 5th, bring in the 6th, bring in the 7th. I would stop at 7. The thing will get a little crowded. And decide on the depth of field. Now, when you have more than 2 or 3 or 4 objects, you may decide that the depth of field has to change now. Maybe you want some of these units in sharp focus and others not. Maybe think of them as buildings. So all of these decisions you can make. Decide, do you want the background in focus or not in focus? Again, this is all your decision to make, as opposed to going out in the field and shooting a building that's context is already given you. If you do this on a regular basis, I promise you, you will emerge from this a different photographer. You will emerge from this a better photographer. With your eyes will pop out of your head. The next time you shoot an interior, every tabletop, every bookshelf, you will look at it differently, I promise you. You will look at interiors differently. You'll see the interior almost as one whole still life. This is a wonderful, wonderful exercise. Thank you again for taking your valuable time to look at these videos, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.